Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Oh, you have a different. Can you do that one? I'll do yours. It's much higher than I'm used to, but I'll. You can? Go ahead. Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jasoda Jasodanandana Brajajanarandana Jasodanandana Brajajanarandana Jamunatira Vanachari Jamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jasodanandana Brajajanarandana Jasodanandana Brajajanarandana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivajagacharya Astatarasatasi Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Śrī Prabhupada Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Shri Shri Radha Nila Madhava Ki Samhita Bhakta Vrinda Ki Hitā Gaur Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. It's upside down. Okay, Hare Krishna. Well, all of you who are here, thank you for coming on time. And admonishment for those who are not here on time. This morning we'll be discussing verses 11 through 17. 11 through 14 are specific to the process of creation, and then 15 is an interesting verse. It's introducing personalities who are part of the process of creation, kind of like defining the, using Bhaktisiddhanta's term, entities. And we'll end with text 17. So yesterday, in addition to the review at the beginning, we discussed verses 9 and 10, and that was an interesting topic to discuss on a Friday night at a Hare Krishna temple. The generative organs, male and female, that represent the original act of procreation, then in turn the praja, each of whom will also have generative organs like their prototype, or the one from whom they were generated. And that originates from the Supreme Personality of Godhead in His pure, unadulterated position as the enjoyer of His own potency, His internal potency, His own pleasure potency, not something outside of Himself, but His own pleasure potency in the form of enjoying the autumn season with the jasmine flowers and the full moon, and deploying His internal potency. He enjoyed His pastimes in Vrindavan. Then His expansion, and the expansion of His expansion, Mahavishnu, desiring to see that the reflection of His internal potency, or the external potency, Maya or Pradhan, has some service to do, and desirous that the living entities, forgetful of their ultimate and constitutional happiness, can have an opportunity to again regain that happiness. He glances. The glance carried by Shambhu, the time energy and the living entities are injected into the material energy, and what we discussed yesterday is this is the perverted reflection of the original enjoyment of the personality of Godhead. And then downstream, or subsequently, all other acts of procreation or generation using generative organs is similarly a perverted reflection of the original happiness of the personality of Godhead with His internal potency. So then it's then Shiva associating with Maya, then in turn the living entities associating with other living entities. That's Tatastha Shakti. So we've identified a number of Vishnu Tattva, Shiva Tattva, Jiva Tattva, each in different categories. And the living entities, the Jivas, who haven't yet received bodies, but when they do receive bodies, they're going to have generative organs that are either male or female, like Lord Shiva or like Durga, and combining produce other living entities. And that impetus for such pleasure or interaction comes from its ultimate original source, as does everything come from its original source. We discussed that. Krishna is the source even of lust, because He's the source of everything. And then we discussed, well, why would He do that? Since lust is the all-devouring sinful enemy of the world, why would He cover or give the living entities that impetus? And the answer is, it connects with the original desire of the Supreme Lord to provide them an opportunity to regain their ultimate happiness, which they can properly use or they can misuse, like any one of us. We can properly use this human form of life or misuse. And then the other lower forms of life, they don't really have the option yet, because they have such heavy karma that has to be exhausted by experiencing their life in the lower life forms and gradually exhausting that karma, evolving in consciousness up to the human life form. and then comes an opportunity again. So here we are with the opportunity. So that's a little summary. And now we're going to hear Brahma Samhita describe from Mahavishnu the various expansions of Garbhodakshay Vishnu and Kshirodakshay Vishnu and their function within the Sarga, or the preliminary creation followed by the secondary creation of Lord Brahma. So we're still in the primary creation feature. So let's chant the verse together. Sahasra Shirsha Purusha Sahasraksha Sahasrapat Sahasra Bahur Vishvatma Sahasrangsha Sahasrasu. Translation. The Lord of the mundane world, Mahavishnu, possesses thousands of heads, eyes, hands. He is the source of thousands of avatars in his thousands of subjective portions. He's a big man. He is the creator of thousands of individual souls. So, because that last sentence kind of puts the head in a spin, I thought souls weren't created. And the answer is, that's correct. Souls are not created. So the meaning of this verse is not, once upon a time there was no souls, and some time passed, and Mahavishnu thought, gee, it'd be nice to have some souls, and boop, there's some souls. That's not what it means. In fact, souls are eternal. We know that from Bhagavad Gita. Never have souls come into being, never will they come into being, and they're not coming into being. So there's a finite number of unlimited jiva souls. And so, more specifically, it's not even that Mahavishnu is ontologically the source of souls. It's not saying that either. Rather, what it's the indication we should understand from this is, we're speaking about creation, the creation of the cosmic manifestation, not creation of souls. So during cosmic annihilation, in a cyclical fashion, the living entities are resting in a susupti state, and then they're going to be brought into an active state. That's the meaning. He's the source of them in that sense, because they're eternal, as is he eternal. And another important point is the first two lines of the verse, Sahasra Shirsha Purusha, Sahasraksha Sahasrapat. Many of you are probably familiar with Purusha Sukta prayers that begin in exactly the same way. The Purusha Sukta prayers are from the Rig Veda. If you can recall, when the demigods, along with Lord Brahma, went to the shore of the Milk Ocean to offer prayers to Lord Vishnu to descend and to protect against the demoniac kings that were overburdening the earth. What were the prayers that the demigods and Lord Brahma recited? Purusha Sukta. Question. Which form of Lord Vishnu was it that they were offering the prayers to? Answer. Kshirodakshay Vishnu. Kshirodakshay Vishnu lies in the ocean of milk. In fact, that's what Kshir means. It's the ocean of milk. Kshirodakshayi Vishnu. So they were petitioning him through the Purusha Sukta prayers. Now in this verse, it's the Mahavishnu who is being described specifically. That's how it's being translated by Bhaktisiddhanta. The Lord of the mundane world, Mahavishnu, possesses Sahasra Shirsha Purusha. In Bhagavad Gita, in Prabhupada's purport to verse 917, I think it is. No, yeah, it's 719, sorry. 719. The Svetashvatara Upanishad version is also quoted. Chapter 3, text 4 and 5, beginning Sahasra Shirsha Purusha Sahasraksha Sahasra. So this is a classic sequence of prayer to address either Kshirodakshayi Vishnu, in the case of the demigods approaching him. In this case it's Mahavishnu. But now let's appreciate something that Jiva Goswami explains and in his commentary that we should understand. They're the same. Garbhadakshayi Vishnu, Kshirodakshayi Vishnu, and Karanadakshayi Vishnu or Mahavishnu, they are one entity. And they're named differently in relation to function. But they're one entity. Although there's three of them, there's one entity. And therefore, without spending a lot of time going through this, sometimes they're used interchangeably, and it's not a mistake because they're one entity. Here's an example. Here's an application of this point. Right now, seated in the temple room, there's maybe 25 or 30 of us. Something like that. So maybe more. So, how many super souls are present in this room right now, at least within human bodies? Probably other living entities here too. And the answer is one. Because super soul is the same super soul within the heart of everyone, although variously situated. It's one super soul. And Garbhadakshayi Vishnu, there's one per universe, but how many universes? Countless number. Some finite number, but so many you can't count. And how many Garbhadakshayi Vishnus are there? It's one. Variously situated. And there's one Mahavishnu from whom the Garbhadakshayi Vishnus come, and from whom the Kshirodakshayi Vishnus come. And thus we have Sahasra Shirsha Purusha, thousands and thousands. When we look at the picture of Mahavishnu, he only has one head, he only has 4 arms, and etc. His bodily parts are smaller number than these numbers, and therefore one of the ways to understand what is being said here in this, because when Mahavishnu is being addressed, is within Mahavishnu is everything, including all the Garbhadakshayi Vishnus and Kshirodakshayi Vishnus, and so thousands of heads and thousands of arms. Or, equally appropriate, is his expansions there's so many super souls and so many Garbhadakshayi Vishnus, thus thousands and thousands. Because although Mahavishnu is being identified, it equally applies to all of them. Then another important application of all of this is the super soul is conscious of all the activities and all the desires and all the feelings and all the sensations, not only of us, but of all living entities, not even all human beings, but all living entities. So he's the soul of all bodies. That's Śrī Vishnu. And then someone asked, is there a soul of the universe? And the answer is yes. He's conscious of everything within the universe. And for that matter, he's conscious of everything in all universes, because there's one Garbhodakshay Vishnu in all of the universes, so he's conscious of everything in all of the universes. That's like information overload, isn't it? You'd blow your circuitry if you had to be conscious of everything everywhere. And then Mahavishnu, we heard this nice presentation yesterday, and I'll just read it again. From Kapila Dev's description to Devahuti about the process of creation, specifically the Mahatattva. 3:26:19. After the Supreme Personality of Godhead impregnates material nature with his internal potency, material nature delivers the sum total of cosmic intelligence, which is known as Hiranmaya. This takes place in material nature when she is agitated by the destinations of the conditioned souls. So how are all the conditioned souls going to know what to do? Like, not just one conditioned soul, Paramatma takes care of that. The term is samasti, all souls. So Brahma has to have that intelligence. He's given that intelligence by Garbhodakshay Vishnu, because Garbhodakshay Vishnu has it. And it's an element, or it's a factor, however you want to, whatever noun you want to use. Hiranmaya is generated. So how does Garbhodakshay Vishnu know? He has cosmic intelligence serving him. And Mahavishnu and the glance of Mahavishnu generates this, because before there's individual universes, there's the ingredients for all universes. So he has this totality of cosmic intelligence. We discussed that, if you remember, yesterday. We're accustomed to thinking of things in a very self-centered, I'm at the center, and things that are real are like within my grasp and purview. But we're getting a much bigger picture. Mahavishnu's superintelligence, Garbhodakshay's intelligence, the supersoul's intelligence, the living entity's intelligence, and all of these Jnana Shakti, if you remember, the glance carries these factors, Kriya Shakti, Jnana Shakti, and Icha Shakti, that's invested within Pradhan by Mahavishnu. He's the generating source of it. And those energies are transformations or expansions of the energies of the spiritual world. It's mind expanding, this subject matter. In the purport of this, a short purport, let's read the short purport of text 11. Bhaktisiddhanta writes, it's one sentence, Mahavishnu, the object of worship of the hymns, of all the Vedas, is possessed of an infinity of senses and potencies. So, I'll just remind you of something that we read yesterday, which was a description of Krishna and Arjuna going to the abode of Mahavishnu to retrieve the sons of the Brahmana. And here's when they entered, they saw many things, but the part that we read, the Lord was surrounded by his personal associates of Nanda and Sunanda, and the personified Sudarshana disc was also standing by him. As is stated in the Vedas, the Lord has innumerable energies, and they were also standing there, personified. So that's a lot of energies, innumerable energies. Too many to count energies. The most important among them was as follows, and there's 4 that are mentioned, but we also spoke about 16, but it's innumerable. So there's prominent ones, and then a further circle of other important ones, and there's innumerable potencies, because he has a big task to do, and he has innumerable potencies that do all the tasks. And if you remember, several times it was explicitly said in the verses, he has nothing to do with his external energy, but his potencies do things simply on his will. He wills, they do. That's called devotional service. They like doing service. And there's a wonderful relationship between him and his potencies. It's a relationship of loving service. Okay. We're moving on to text 12. Narayana sa bhagavan apastasmat sanatanat avirasit karnarno nidhi sankarshanatmaka yoga nidram katastasmin sahasrangsha swayam mahan. Here's that Sahasra again, Sahasrangsha Swayam Mahan. He has thousands of subjective portions. So here's the translation. The same Mahavishnu is spoken of by the name Narayana in this mundane world. Narayana we normally think of as Narayana in Vaikuntha, and he's with his consort Lakshmi Narayana. So Brahma Samhita is instructing us. He's also known, Mahavishnu is also known as Narayana. From that eternal person has sprung the vast expanse of water of the spiritual causal ocean. The subjective portion of Sankarshana, who abides in the Paravyom, the above Supreme Purusha with thousands of subjective portions, reposes in the state of divine sleep, Yoga Nidra, in the waters of the spiritual causal ocean. So we'll be discussing Yoga Nidra a little bit. We'll be discussing the identity of Mahavishnu as Narayana, specifically Narayana in this mundane world, because there's Narayana in the Vaikuntha realm. Now that Narayana in the mundane realm, we should understand, once again, there is no contact with matter. There's no adulteration. The adulteration takes place with Lord Shiva, and therefore he's in a different tattva. Although he's svangsa, by contact with matter, there's adulteration. With Mahavishnu, he's carrying out, or he's willing the creation process to take place, but there's no adulteration. So he is therefore rightfully called Narayana. Now, some of you may recall the exchange between Lord Brahma and Krishna after the Brahma Vimohan Leela. And Brahma has a awakening when he was covered by momentarily by a desire to examine the extent of Krishna's unlimited mystic powers. So he tested him and thus was covered when he was doing that. And then he saw each of the calves and cowherd boys were actually expansions directly from Krishna, and they were Narayana forms, and then they all disappeared, all just by Krishna's will. And so then he offered prayers to Krishna, addressing Krishna in Vrindavan as Narayana. And Brahma said, Krishna said, Brahma, what are you talking about? I'm just a little boy. And you're calling me Narayana. Narayana is your father, and I'm a little boy. So then he gives 3 reasons, this very famous passage, where it's logic, or it's compelling. Reasons why he's addressing him as Narayana. There are 3 reasons. You note takers might want to take note. One of those reasons is that his abode is in the water from Nara. Nara, in this like Narayan. In this case, Nara is indicating Mahavishnu, and from the, just as mentioned in this verse, the waters of, here's the verse. The waters of the causal ocean are generated from the body of Mahavishnu. So he's resting in the water generated from the body of Nara. And therefore, his expansion is situated in that way, and therefore he should be considered as Narayana. Narayana, this is quoting directly the translation from chapter 14 of the 10th canto, Brahma speaking to Krishna. Narayana refers to one whose abode is in the water born from Nara, and that Narayana is your plenary portion. All your plenary portions are transcendental. They are not creations of Maya. They are absolute. The second explanation he gives is, you are the ayana, or the shelter, of all naras, all living beings. You are that shelter, and you are the shelter of others who also give shelter. You're shelter of the expansions from you, such as the Chaturvyuha and Narayana Vaikuntha and so forth. You are the shelter. You, Krishna, Swayam Bhagavan Krishna, Brajendra Nandana Krishna, you are the shelter of them all, Therefore, it is appropriate to identify you as Narayana. You're the shelter of all Naras. And the third is, you're the seer of all creation. We went through that in the previous verse. As Mahavishnu, as Garbhodakshay Vishnu, as Kshirodakshay Vishnu, you're the seer of all creation. Here's the translation. There are countless universes and fathomless transcendental Vaikunthas, both in this material world and in the transcendental world. You see all the deeds of all living beings in the past, present, and future. Since you are the witness, Ayana, of all such deeds, you know the essence of everything. All the worlds exist because you oversee them. None can live, move, or have their being without your supervision. You oversee the wanderings of all living beings. For this reason also, you're the primeval Lord, Narayana. In 13th chapter Bhagavad Gita stated, Upadrashta Onamantacha. As specifically, that's the super soul. But it's not only the super soul. Garbhodakshay Vishnu sees everything, and Mahavishnu sees everything, and after all, they're the same entity anyways, but from different perspectives or points of view. They, as expansions of Krishna, see everything, and so he's Narayana. You're the witness of everything. You're the witness of all the creation, or the seer of all creation. So the verse is saying, all of that is just to give an explanation of the statement that Mahavishnu is spoken of by the name Narayana in this mundane world. Mahavishnu can also be referred to as Narayana, as Krishna in Goloka can be referred to as Narayana. So it's just broadening our sense of everything. Who is Narayana? Krishna is the original Narayana. Important. Then there's reference specifically to Yoga Nidra. The statement is, the subjective portion of Sankarshan, who abides in Paravyoma, the above Supreme Purusha, with thousands of subjective portions, reposes in the state of divine sleep, Yoga Nidra, in the waters of the spiritual causal ocean. So, what's Yoga Nidra? We discussed briefly. Here's some additional, yesterday, here's some additional scriptural references that help us understand. A lot of these references, once again, there's from 2nd canto, the middle part, and the 3rd canto, the middle part, where the process of creation is described. So this is from 3.8.10. At that time, when the three worlds were submerged in water, Garbhodakshayi Vishnu was alone, lying on his bedstead, the great snake Ananta. And although he appeared to be in slumber, in his own internal potency, free from the action of the external energy, his eyes were not completely closed. So this is Garbhodakshayi Vishnu in a state of Yoga Nidra, but so Garbhodakshayi Vishnu may also indicate the same Mahavishnu, as I mentioned, because they're the same entity, and sometimes they're referred to even in interchangeable manner. So don't get confused. It's really easy to get confused because we have this very linear thing and departmental, compartmental thing. this is this and that is that, something else is something else. And we get really confused when there's a little crossover. So get unconfused real quick, because Yoga Nidra is a state where, here's Prabhupada's purport. It's a state where the Supreme Lord, with his internal potency, rather than her being manifest as we see, Radha, Nilamadhava, or Lakshmi, Nrsimha outside, she's inside. Here's Prabhupada's purport. The Lord is eternally enjoying transcendental bliss by his internal potency. He refers to Sridhar Swami, who explains, Sri Narayana's eyes were not completely closed, meaning that he was absorbed in his spiritual energy. He then opened his eyes. And then another phrase in that same verse is Svatma Ratau, means he rejects the enjoyment of Maya and instead is always reveling in his own ecstasy without material engagement. It's same emphasis, and it's important. It's repeated because it's important. He's with his internal potency. And Rama Devi, here's a further description. Rama Devi induces the state of Yoga Nidra because of knowing the desire of her master. He wishes to enjoy his spiritual potency within. And so Rama Devi, the statement is made, she makes that arrangement through her Yogamaya aspect. So now we have multiple terms for the same entity, the internal potency. So there's one, Antaranga Shakti. Her name, Rama Devi. Another name, specifically indicating the mystic slumber aspect of enjoying internally with his eyes partially closed but not closed. That's Yoga Nidra. And Yoga Maya. So we should understand any one of those terms are appropriate. Yoga Maya, Yoga Nidra, Rama Devi, internal potency, Chit Shakti. Depending upon what we wish to indicate, the terms are used, but it's the same entity. So the verse, back to the verse, there he is, lying on the causal ocean in this Yoga Nidra state, enjoying his internal potency within, on the causal ocean which has come from his own body, and it's fully spiritual ocean, as is he, fully spiritual. So let's go on to the next verse. Oh, there's a nice image of Lord Brahma offering these prayers to Krishna, indicating you are Narayana. And here's a nice painting. This, of course, because there's Lord Brahma coming from his transcendental body. This is Garbhodakshay Vishnu. But as Garbhodakshay Vishnu is lying on the Garbhodak ocean, Mahavishnu is lying on the causal ocean. So if you just remove that lotus with Lord Brahma at the top, you have an image of Mahavishnu lying on the causal ocean with his eyes half closed or partially open in Yoga Nidra, enjoying with Rama within. So the next thing that's going to happen in text 13, we're going to hear, because the elements have separated. It's now Mahatattva. But we don't have universes yet. It's just part of the sequence. So next is, from the pores of his body, there are seeds of universes. And they're specifically identified as spiritual, because they're directly from his body, and his body is all spiritual. Desiring for the living entities who are now in the Mahatattva, because the glands carried them, to have a place to hang out, to live, to reside. He's going to generate from his body, he's going to have a real strong exhalation, and universes are going to come streaming from his body into the Mahatattva and start to attach themselves, the elements start to attach themselves to the seeds, and the seeds that thus start to enlarge. That's what's coming. So that's what it says here. The Mahatattva is thus manifest, into which the seeds of the universe are sent. And here's the verse that says that. Let's chant together. Tadroma bila jaleshu bijam sankarshanasya cha haimanya nandi jatani mahabhutan vritani to. The spiritual seeds of Sankarshana, existing in the pores of skin of Mahavishnu, are born as so many golden sperms. These sperms are covered with 5 great elements because they enter into the universe, into the Mahatattva by his exhalation, and the parts of, or some of those 5 elements start to congeal or form around those seeds. Just as with the impregnation act of Lord Shiva, the elements are agitated, the pradhana is agitated and elements are formed, and it's the force of the living entity. In this case, this is the force of the seeds of the universes, and now congealing around the universes are the elements. Yeah, here's a little more of Bhaktisiddhanta's language, the non-conglomerate language. Non-conglomerate. What does that mean? They're kind of adhering to or sticking to the seeds, but they're not in a cooperative state yet. It's not a full universe with its layers and so forth and so on. It's not, using Tamal Krishna Maharaj's language, they're not producing their product yet. So 2 things. One of them is Prabhupada's likening this condition to a motor car factory where the parts are there unassembled. They have to get assembled before you have a car, but the parts are there in the factory. That's his example. So the reference to this is 2.532 Bhagavatam. Brahma is describing the process of creation to Narada, where he says, "O Narada, best of the transcendentalists, the forms of the body cannot take place as long as these created parts, namely the elements, the senses, mind, and modes of nature, are not assembled." So, Mahatattva is all these things are there. The elements, the mind, the modes of nature, the senses, knowledge acquiring working senses, the objects, the whole thing is there. Unassembled parts. In Srila Prabhupada's purport, he writes, the different types of bodily construction of the living entities are exactly like different types of motor cars manufactured by assembling the allied motor parts. When the car is ready, the driver sits in the car and moves as he desires. So it's a factory condition, unassembled. That's the Mahatattva. As the universe seeds enter, and there's this congealing around the seeds, but it's still disconnected, non-cooperative parts. One of our commentators on the Bhagavatam, Vira Raghava Acharya, comments on this verse that the Bhagavatam verse, when it refers to body, it's the body of the universe, which is the Lord's body. He has these seeds, like the seeds of Sankarsana. The Lord's body, for the purpose of the living entities are going to reside within there. The body of the universes are unable to take shape because the vital process of conglomeration has not been applied. And so this goes on for a long time, meaning there's the causal ocean, and Prabhupada uses the description like footballs floating in water. The universes are there in the causal ocean, and congealing around them are elements, so they're just floating, and it goes on for eons, is one term that's used, in thousands of years. And that's not our years, celestial years. And what's Mahavishnu doing? He's enjoying with Ramadevi. He's quite detached. And it goes on and on. The universe is floating around in the causal ocean for some time. So something has to happen, and it's going to happen. That's what we're going to hear next. Just couple other little embellishments. These spiritual seeds of Sankarsana are described by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur as universes embedded within the transcendental form of the Lord. And these spiritual seeds, they embody the principle of spiritual reflection. So it's not the material reflection like we spoke of perverted reflection, but it's something different. Because it's not, they're fully spiritual. They're within the body of the Supreme Lord. There's no touch of matter and no touch of the modes of nature and any other thing. But they're seeds. They're not yet, in their fullness. So in that sense, they embody the principle of spiritual reflection. Or, he also says, a reflection of the infinite spiritual world. And they're referred to by Bhaktisiddhanta as golden eggs. So like at the bottom, that chart, where you see the universes expanding from the body of Mahavishnu, they're all golden in color, because they're golden. They're in their seed-like state, and then seeds enlarge by the conglomerating feature. And then one last thing is the exhalation, how the seeds leave his body and enter into the Mahatattva. Here's Srimad Bhagavatam 3.5.27. Quote, thereafter, influenced by the interactions of eternal time, the supreme total of matter, called the Mahatattva, becomes manifested, and in this Mahatattva, the unalloyed goodness, the Supreme Lord, sowed the seeds of the universal manifestation out of his own body. And similarly, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami in Madhya Lila chapter 20, this is Lord Chaitanya's instructions to Sanatana Goswami, describes it this way. These universes are understood to be floating in air as the Mahavishnu exhales. So this isn't the air like, what's in the room and outside the window. It's metaphorical. It's like that. They are like atomic particles that float in sunshine and pass through the holes of a screen. All these universes are thus created by the exhalation of Mahavishnu. So we've all seen that. In the morning sun, there's a screen, and little particles are floating in and out of the screen. We've all seen that. So like that, the universes just float as he exhales. Of course, under his power, they are heading towards the Mahatattva, and they enter the Mahatattva. And how many of them are there? Innumerable. So what's next? This is exciting, huh? Forming universe. If you ever wanted to create a universe, now you know how to do it. Patyandam evam ekangsad vishati swayam sahasra murdha vishvatma mahavishnur sanatanaha. Translation. The same Mahavishnu entered each universe. Who's that? Garbhodakshayi Vishnu. As his own separate subjective portions, plural, because there's so many universes, so many seeds. The divine portions that entered into each universe are possessed of his majestic extension, i.e., they are the eternal universal soul, Mahavishnu, possessing thousands and thousands of heads. So, Garbhodakshayi Vishnu is entering into each of the universes. And explicitly in the commentary, Bhaktisiddhanta is saying these should be understood as non-different or identical with Mahavishnu. So, it is Mahavishnu, or identical with Mahavishnu with a different name because of function. And let us do this one more time, at least. This is not a chronological thing. It's not once upon a time Mahavishnu existed. There was no Garbhodakshayi Vishnu and no Kshirodakshayi Vishnu. And some things happened, and Mahavishnu thought, okay, it's time to create he who didn't exist before, Garbhodakshayi Vishnu. I'll just kind of like expand myself and become Garbhodakshayi Vishnu. No, not like that. These are eternal entities, Vishnu tattva forms, and we're describing them in a chronological fashion because that's how our brains work. But they're actually eternal. Time is active with creation, but the Vishnu forms are not created. First comes one, and then comes the other, and then comes the other. It's just they're manifesting themselves for the purpose of creation. That's what they do, and they're eternal. Here's a statement from first canto, chapter 3, text number 3. Remember we quoted 131 about the different potencies, 16 potencies under the direction of Mahavishnu, as well as hearing now he has unlimited potencies. So this is a couple of verses later, 133, where Sutta Goswami is stating, it is believed that all these universal planetary systems are situated on the extensive body of the Purusha, Garbhodakshayi Vishnu, but he has nothing to do with the creative material ingredients. His body is eternally in spiritual existence par excellence. French term. We're hearing it again. He's involved, he enters into the universes, but he has nothing to do. He's not contaminated by that. We're tiny souls. We come in contact with bodies and we become contaminated and bewildered and all kinds of things. But he is not like that. He is always with his internal potency, and he's always fully spiritual, and he's never influenced by the fact that he enters into the universes. That's what we're to understand. Jiva Goswami in his Krishna Sandarbha refers to this very same verse, where he says about this verse, the word Vishuddham, or pure, means that because the Supreme Personality of Godhead in all transcendental potencies is all transcendental potencies, therefore he can remain always pure and free from even the slightest trace of material contamination. The word urjitam, or powerful and glorious, means that because the Lord's form is full of supreme spiritual bliss, he remains always powerful and glorious in his spiritual prowess, never becoming diminished under any circumstances. And then he, in Krishna Sandarbha, refers to another verse in Canto 3, Chapter 9, which is, it says, "O my Lord, I do not see a form superior to your present form of eternal bliss and knowledge." This is Brahma praying to Garbhodakshay Vishnu. So the point is, he's never influenced by matter. He's never influenced by matter at any stage, even entering into the universe and doing the affairs of creation. So how does the creation take place? It takes place through the agency of his potencies. His desire is fully spiritual, Ichha Shakti, and the other energies carry out his desire. That's why he has so many energies, to do his service unto the Supreme Lord. In his purport to this verse, Bhaktisiddhanta speaks of Garbhodakshay Vishnu as the divine guide from within. The commas are there. The divine guide, comma, from within, comma, of all souls. So the point here is Kshirodakshay Vishnu is the guide of each individual soul, and collectively then all souls. Garbhodakshay Vishnu is simultaneously the guide of all souls from a position within the universe. To underscore each of the Purusha avatars are the same. Maybe you have, like me, become confused when there's a reference. Well, I'll put it as a question. What is your understanding of the source of the avatars within this world? So avatar means they descend into this material realm. So what is the source of those avatars? Kshirodakshay Vishnu. Do you recall that we heard that Mahavishnu is the source? It was in the previous verse. And here's a verse, 1st Canto, Chapter 3, Text 5, that says Garbhodakshay Vishnu is the source. Quoting the translation, "This form," brackets, "the second manifestation of the Purusha, Garbhodakshay Vishnu, is the source and indestructible seed of multifarious incarnations within the universe. From the particles and portions of this form, different living entities like demigods, men, and others are created," unquote. So Mahavishnu, there's a reference. Garbhodakshay Vishnu, there's a reference. And Kshirodakshay Vishnu is what we commonly hear. So, what's going on? There's a contradiction, right? No. Because they're the same entity. Sometimes referred to this way, sometimes referred to that way. So, help yourself get unconfused by understanding that message. They're referred to by function, but sometimes even their functions are interchangeably referred to. And it's not incorrect. Okay, we're ready for the next verse. Now, the next verse, text 15, there's a little break because we've been hearing up to this point the sequence of sarga, or the process of creation that Lord Vishnu does with the agency of his various potencies. Break. We're now going to hear something about the personalities who are going to be later engaged in subsequent parts of creation. So don't get confused. It's really easy to get confused. So I'm helping you to not get confused. Trying anyway. Here's an illustration of Mahavishnu reclining in the causal ocean, extending from his body unlimited spiritual seeds. Combining around those spiritual seeds are elements, the 5 gross elements, into which he enters each of as Garbhodakshay Vishnu. So now here's text 15. Vamangad asrajad Vishnum Dakshinagad Prajapatim Jyotirlinga Mayam Tambhum Kurcha Deshad Avasrajat. Translation: the same Mahavishnu created Vishnu. He didn't create Vishnu, but he's expanding Vishnu, who is eternal. It's just manifesting. Vishnu from his left limb. Brahma, the first progenitor of beings, from his right limb. And from the space between his 2 eyebrows, Shambhu, the divine masculine manifested halo. So, there's 3 personalities or entities that are being spoken of, each coming from Mahavishnu. Let's start with the first one. Brahma is being referred to in the verse, in the Sanskrit, as Prajapatim. Both Bhaktisiddhanta and in his commentary Jiva Goswami makes it very, very clear this is not Brahma, Chaturmukha Brahma of this universe, because there isn't a universe yet. If it's not him, then who is it? It's prototype Brahma. What's prototype Brahma? Well, anyone not know what prototype means? Like if you want to go to get something patented, you make a prototype and you take it to the patent office and say, I want to patent this, from which I want to make many others like it. That's the prototype. So this is prototype Brahma, from whom all other Brahmas of all the universes, once they're universes to fill up, that 4-headed Brahma or 10-headed Brahma or the other Brahmas derive their power and their whole program from this prototype Brahma. That's the one that's being referred to. In Bhaktisiddhanta's purport and Jiva Goswami's commentary, Hiranya Garbha Brahma is how he's differentiated from Chaturmukha Brahma. Hiranya Garbha. Garbha means egg. Hiranya Garbha, the golden egg. That's these universes. So Mahavishnu, who's generated the seeds, also generates these personalities or entities. Prajapatim. And then next is mentioned, for the first one is Vishnu from his left limb. Vishnu from his left limb is Shiradakshay Vishnu. One might think it's Garbhadakshay Vishnu, but the language in the commentary makes it clear. It's Shiradakshay Vishnu. Because he's going to have a very important function we'll hear about in just a moment. But it's Shiradakshay Vishnu. And then there's, from the space between his two eyebrows, Shambhu is manifest. Question. Isn't this a contradiction? Because how does Lord Shiva make his appearance in each universe? It's from the forehead of Lord Brahma. And here this is Mahavishnu is producing Shambhu. And the answer is, well, this is the prototype. And second point is, from our acharyas, because what do we know about all this? They say this is not the same as the halo Shambhu that's the glance of Mahavishnu. Exactly how they connect doesn't say. It just says that they're not the same. It's complex, isn't it? So here's the statement. Mahavishnu expands from his left limb, Shiradakshay Vishnu, from his right limb, this prototype Brahma, and from his eyebrow, the prototype Shambhu. Because there's universes that are going to have to, things are going to have to happen. And so there's not individual universes yet, but these entities that Mahavishnu is expanding are going to do things to help in the process of creation. That it's part of Sarga, it's part of what he does. I'm going to read two verses that's from Srimad Bhagavatam that help us understand something about this prototype Brahma. One is Canto 2, Chapter 5, text number 30. Here's the translation. This is Brahma speaking to Narada about what he did, the creation program. From the mode of goodness, the mind is generated. This is Mahatattva manifesting. As also the 10 demigods controlling the bodily movements. There's not bodies yet. They're just demigods controlling what's going to happen later. This is the Mahatattva stage. Such demigods is known as the controller of directions, the controller of air. There's air, but there's no universes yet. So the controller of air. The sun god, not the sun within this universe, but the god that is going to be in controller of the sun. So that's Surya Narayan. The father of Daksha Prajapati, the Ashvini Kumaras, the fire god, the king of heaven, the worshipable deity of heaven, that's Vamana. The chief of the Adityas, and Brahmaji the Prajapati all come into existence. In Prabhupada's purport, he explains that this is the prototype Brahma. It's not the individual Brahma within all the universes because he hasn't appeared yet. It's the prototype Brahma that's being spoken about. As from Mahavishnu, from his right limb, Brahma came. This is another description. Text 34 of the same chapter, Canto 2, Chapter 5. Thus all these became assembled by the force of the energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This universe certainly came into being by accepting both the primary and secondary causes of creation. What? Prabhupada's purport. There are two modes of material creation: the creation of the collective universes, as stated above, done by Mahavishnu, and the creation of the single universe. Both are done by the Lord. And thus, the universal shape, as we can see, takes place. And Prabhupada explains this Hiranyagarbha, the prototype Brahma. Persons who are worshippers of Hiranyagarbha, the plenary expansion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Garbhodakshay Vishnu, do not directly approach the Personality of Godhead in Vaikuntha. That's from Canto 3, Chapter 32, Text 8. He doesn't explain it, it's just, my goodness, it's just part of the complexity of things. But these three, the prototype Brahma, the prototype Shambhu, and Kshirodakshay Vishnu are going to have some nice service to do. We're going to hear about that after breakfast. So now we just have two more verses for this morning. Here's text 16. Ahankaratmakam vishvam tasmat etad vijayata. Translation: the function of Shambhu in relation to jivas is that this universe, enshrining the mundane egoistic principle, has originated from Shambhu. So it can mean either one of two things. The mundane egoistic principle emanates from Shambhu, or the universe emanates from Shambhu, meaning the elements of the universe. Here's what Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur says about this. It's you have to listen carefully. There's two things going on. One is the Mahatattva, the element, false ego, is produced. That's one. Another is himself, Shambhu, represents the mundane egoistic principle. Here's Bhaktisiddhanta's language from the purport. Shambhu fully enshrines the mundane egoistic principle, the innumerable jivas, as spiritual particles emanating from Mahavishnu in the form of pencils of rays of effulgence, have no relation with this mundane world, but when they desire to lord it over Maya, forgetting their real identity, the egoistic principle, Shambhu, entering into their entities, makes them identify as separate enjoyers of mundane entities, like stuff, objects, your computer and your cell phone and your car and your bank account and your home and stuff. Where does that tendency come from? It's infused from Shambhu. He enters into our entities, into our beings. So it's like a double whammy. There's this false ego element that covers all beings, all conditioned souls, and then there's the Shambhu factor, who, again, the egoistic principle, Shambhu, entering into their entities, makes them identify themselves as separate enjoyers of mundane entities. This is the souls before they even get bodies and do things. What's a nice person like ourselves to do? We got this false ego energy and this, what's the term? Mundane, egoistic principle entering into our entities, our existence. And we're trying to become devotees. No wonder there's some difficulty in becoming nice devotees. This false egoistic principle, or mundane egoistic principle, and the element itself. And therefore the conclusion is, Krishna consciousness means we have to get free from both of such influences. But here's the good news. The internal potency is stronger. And the internal potency represented by Srimati Radharani, who gifts to us the opportunity for devotional service that's done through the agency of devotees carrying devotion within their heart, is more powerful. So how important it is to have the association of devotees and to not make offenses to those devotees because whatever the reasons that we do things that are offensive. It's our good fortune to overcome that double bind or double bondage and to receive bhakti instead of false ego and having our entities having been entered into by the mundane egoistic principle of Shambhu. Whew. Looks tough. And it is tough if we struggle on our own. Daiviheshu gunamayi mama maya duratyaya mama viye prapadyante. That's the alternative. So last verse for this morning. Atatais tri vidhayar vishayar lilam udvahata kila yoga nidra bhagavati tasya shir avyasangata. Translation. Thereupon, the same great personality Godhead, assuming the threefold forms of Vishnu, Prajapati, and Shambhu, remember from text 15, entering into the mundane universe, plays the pastimes of preservation, creation, and destruction of this world. This pastime is contained in the mundane world. Hence, it being perverted, the Supreme Lord, identical with Mahavishnu, prefers to consort with the goddess Yoga Nidra, the constituent of his own spiritual chit potency, full of ecstatic trance of eternal bliss appertaining to his own divine personality. So by his will, Mahavishnu's will, these three entities who generated from his body, he sends them to enter into each of the universes. And these are the universes that are floating like footballs on the causal ocean. And these are the deities controlling the modes, right? The qualitative incarnations or guna avatars. That's these three. And the elements still have their sense, and the demigods controlling the elements have their sense of egotism, like, they're independent. They have that sense. They're not independent, but they have that sense. So now we're going to do a little summary and we're done for this morning. This is now summarizing Bhaktisiddhanta's summary from his purport of this verse. So let's go back to the Krishna who is existing in his spiritual abode in a state of Vishuddha Sattva. And he's associating with his internal potency, he's associating with his pure devotees who have the same nature and purity as him, and they know nothing else but loving service. Sounds pretty good. However, some living entities have a rebellious spirit. And because of that rebellious spirit, their nature becomes perverted, and instead of wishing to serve the Supreme Lord, they wish to enjoy independently of the Supreme Lord. And so they're then given this association with both Shambhu and Maya, with false egos, where they wish to have separate enjoyment. And so the universe is created to make a facility for that separate enjoyment that has built into it a corrective measure to return them again to their proper position. Just as the Supreme Lord has no relationship with Maya, the living entities actually have no relationship. However, and there are some entities described in his purport that are like that. They have no identification with matter. Even they may be in the field of matter, like, pure devotees. The Vastu Gata personalities, if you remember that term. But there's others, some living entities, they desire independent enjoyment, so they're given this illusory energy, Maya, to try to enjoy independently. And they have to have false egos to do that, so they're given or enthused with or filled with this spirit of mundane egoistic principle, a gift of Shambhu, to try to become separate enjoyers. In this way, this enshrining of the mundane egoistic principle is then passed on to us. It's like father to son. So we're going to hear then about how to get out of Maya. That's the coming attractions, the upcoming verses. How Brahma is born in this condition but desires his relationship with Krishna. So he's given the means, as we are also given the means. And we can get out of Maya, that false egoistic principle, and enter into our true ego. Okay. We're done for this morning. Question?
Questions? Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you. Yoga Nindra is a divine sleep, and it's referred as a Ramadevi. Is that the Ramadevi is also Lord Shiva's wife? Am I confusing myself?
That's Uma.
That's
Rama is the internal potency of Mahavishnu.
I'm clear, but in India growing up, we had this
I don't know what he happened
Rama,
in India growing up.
The Rama or Ramesh, that word refers to Lord Shiva and his consort.
Okay.
So, because that's one. And Prabhu, you had a question, correct? Why don't you ask? And I'll come back.
Quickly, Maharaj, the prototype Brahma, is he a Jivatma or is he a special?
I recall in Tamal Krishna Maharaj's presentation that question was asked, and he said, I have to look it up. And the answer, after he looked it up from one of the commentaries that he had Gopi Pranadana translate, the indication was no, but Shakti. Not Vishnu Tattva, not Jiva Tattva, but Shakti Tattva. That's what I recall from Tamal Krishna Maharaj's research from our acharyas. Yes?
Okay, Maharaj. So this 5:16, where you repeated many times this mundane egoistic principle, is originated from Sambhu. That's what it states here.
Yes.
Now, we also know that mana buddhi ahankar, the soul has that covering.
Yes.
So, is that false ego we are getting from this particular Shambhu, or it's part of our soul from time immemorial?
Here's my understanding of the unfolding of creation as we're hearing it. Could you see what that sound is? Sounds like somebody's phone. The living entities that are in the susupti state within the body of Mahavishnu, it is presumed that they had a prior existence before the susupti state. They were at some stage embodied with activity, karma, and impressions, and thus, guna and karma is there. There's a subtle body. The gross body is finished. They're then left, withdrawn in this susupti state of consciousness, but the subtle body is there, which holds the impressions that are not activated because time is not active. Creation comes into being by the will of Mahavishnu and the action of the time energy. So those subtle bodies, mind, intelligence, and false ego are there. Correct? That's part of the subtle body, mind, intelligence, and false ego. Now that would lead one to the conclusion that they're ever existing. Like, the conditioned state is nitya baddha, which means the subtle body with its false ego is nitya. And the time energy then moves that subtle matter, and then the grosser matter we're going to hear the details about coming up. So one answer could be they're always there, as the soul is always conditioned for the nitya baddha souls. But one could make an argument, and I've not heard any description from our acharyas one way or the other, so I'm just presenting. The false ego element is activated from Mahatattva by the contact of the jiva souls and time energy. Mahatattva, the elements become differentiated. So now there's this additional false ego element. So exactly how that additional false ego element interplays with the existing subtle body of the living entities, I've not read any description of it. But it would stand to reason that there's some interaction. Exactly how that goes, I have not read anything. And I don't care to speculate about what it is, but something is there for a purpose. Does that answer your question?
Yes, Maharaj. So, to follow up, so when let's say, hypothetically, a soul goes back to Godhead in original spiritual world, so he takes his man, buddhi, ahankar with him.
No, they're dissolved. It's stated by Lord Kapila to Devahuti. Dissolved.
Okay.
Things go back to their elemental state, including the mind, material mind, and false ego. They're cast off, you can say, or they're dissolved.
So we become pure at that point.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Maharaj.
Go ahead.
Yeah, there are a couple of questions online. The first one is from Brajahari Prabhu. He asks, is Shambhu the same who annihilates the universe when the Lord so desires?
This is again, the complexity of Lord Shiva. Someone, I'm looking over on this side because this discussion took place yesterday. And the answer can be yes or can be no. It's another aspect of Lord Shiva, known as Rudra, who is situated at the bottom of the universe. So it's an aspect of Lord Shiva, in that sense is yes. But because it's a different aspect of Lord Shiva, the answer is no. What's the other question?
The other question is kind of related from Premananda Mataji. Are all the Shambhus the same, just as all Mahavishnus are the same in one sense?
Yes and no. It's one entity, variously manifest. So one entity, yes. Variously manifest with different functions, no. Rudra, that's like, it's complex. So when we're fast forwarding now, where Brahma is born, he wants some assistance. The four Kumaras manifest. They say, Dad, no thanks, we don't want to get married and get involved in material affairs. So he becomes angry, and Rudra manifests from his forehead. And then that Rudra expands into 11. And they start destroying everything. And they even one of them, or some of them, come after Brahma to destroy him. And he says, stop. You can do your destruction thing later. You should just do penance and meditate. You'll become pacified. So they're given a place. They go to the lower parts of the universe. And I'll call you when it's time, kind of a message. And when it's time, they do their destruction. But that's different aspect of the same Lord Shiva, who is doing all these things that we're speaking about now in the process of creation. They're in the process of destruction. So anyway, it's different, but the same entity, so therefore it's one.
So Maharaj, Shambhu is created from the glands of Mahavishnu. He carries the living entities and the time into the Pradhan. So where does the prototype Brahma reside? So when the prototype Brahma is created from the left limb of Mahavishnu, where does he go? Does he go into the Pradhana and then enter into all the universes?
I don't have the answer to that question. I said this, so I'll say it again. I have not read where our acharyas comment how Shambhu, involved in the glands of Mahavishnu, differs from the Shambhu that's created from the brow of Mahavishnu. They only state they're different. Now maybe there is some commentary that I'm unaware of, but I'm unaware of it, so I can't comment. I'm definitely not going to speculate on any of this stuff. It's a waste of time. I don't know of the difference between the two, except there's a difference. Okay?
Yes, Maharaj. And one more question.
Yeah.
So we say that all this, the universes which are coming out from the pores of Mahavishnu, they actually fly.
The seeds. Yeah.
They actually fly, and we again say that they are actually floating on the causal ocean and go towards the Pradhan. So where is this Pradhan?
No. Let's redo that one. They're propelled or emanated from the body of Mahavishnu by his exhalation. And in a metaphorical way, they're like floating in air, like particles that enter through the screen, and they're floating through the screen on the rays of the sun, like that. Wait, don't. So, they are then injected into or cast into the Mahatattva. In the Mahatattva, the five gross elements begin to congeal or attach themselves to the seed. And then those seeds that have some five gross elements surrounding them, they float in the causal ocean. Oh. So let's do this. The causal ocean has on one side the spiritual sky and the other side the material energy. At this state, the material energy is the Mahatattva. That's the state in which it is. So from Mahavishnu, lying in the midst of the causal ocean, the living entities are directed that way. On the other side of the causal ocean, and then they begin to float. Does that help?
Yes, Maharaj.
Okay. Yes.
Thank you, Maharaj. This is a follow-up question in connection with Nityagaranga Prabhu's question. So there are demigods of the 5 elements.
Demigods of the 5 elements.
So their role is, when does their role start? So those elements
they're the controllers of the elements.
And they come before
Yes.
the 3? Okay.
Yes. There's no universes yet. It's not the demigods within the universe. These are the controllers of the elements. Have you read Brihad Bhagavatamrita? Parts of it?
Parts of it, yeah.
Have you read the part where Gopakumar passes through the layers of the universe?
Mm-hmm.
In each of those layers of the universe, there are controllers of those elements.
Right.
That's where those prototype demigods reside, in the layers of the universe.
So they come before the 3...
Yes, correct. We don't have anything inside yet. We don't even have the proper layers yet. Because they're going to start praying. We're going to hear this, after breakfast. They offer prayers. Help! They pray to Mahavishnu, who provides the help. We'll hear the detail. But there's no Brahma, there's lots of no things. This is before, as you said. Can we do something with the ring back? On the lady's side, yes.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. This Mahavishnu, Garbhodakasaya Vishnu and Kshirodakasaya Vishnu, do they have their abode in the spiritual world, or just the other side of Viraja river in the material world?
Their abode is, as you see in the diagram. Mahavishnu resides where?
Is it in the material
In the causal
world?
ocean.
Causal.
But listen, we also heard 4 times already, now it's the 5th time, there's another place, at least one other place, where he resides, and that's Mahavishnu Loka, where Arjuna and Krishna go. And it's not, they don't find him reclining on Ananta Shesh, floating in the causal ocean. They find him in another place that has palaces and parks and trees and all kinds of nice things. So he has at least 2 residences, and one can assume maybe multiple residences. And Garbhodakshaya Vishnu similarly, and Kshirodakshaya Vishnu similarly, one might assume that. But we're dealing specifically now with the process of creation, and so in the process of creation, we're identifying where his location is, reclining on Ananta Shesh in the causal ocean.
So Maharaja, causal ocean and milk ocean both are same or different?
Say it again?
The causal ocean and milk ocean. Milk ocean?
They're different.
They're different. In the Krishna book, the first chapter, when Lord Brahma goes to the Sveta Kalpa, that is to pray Mahavishnu, the same...
Kshirodakshaya Vishnu, the milk ocean.
So that is different, and causal ocean is different.
Correct. You're asking the same question again. And the answer is yes, different. Their function is different. Their residence is different. Their identity is the same. Their names are different, but the entity is the same.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Okay. Yes.
related to the same question. My question actually was, Garbhodakshaya ocean is not the causal ocean. Though.
Correct.
So
we're going to hear, you're ahead of yourself, or ahead of the text. But when Garbhodakshaya Vishnu enters, it's a sealed universe. This is what is described by our acharyas. And therefore it's hot. So he perspires. And when he perspires, half the universe fills with the Garbhodak ocean, which is different than the causal ocean, because those universes are floating on the causal ocean, into which Garbhodakshaya Vishnu has come and has perspired, making the Garbhodak ocean within the universe.
the reason I was asking is because when we stated that Lord Brahma said 3 reasons when he said Krishna, Narayana, and Krishna said, you are in the waters which has sprung from Mahavishnu. So I was assuming maybe that causal ocean made that Garbhodakshaya ocean. And
I understand how you made the connection, now that you've given the explanation. But let's go back to, they're actually one entity, which is what Brahma is saying in his prayers. You are that Narayana. Now, Krishna, who is standing before Lord Brahma, a little cowherd boy, is not lying in any ocean. He's standing under a tree holding yogurt and fruit in his hand. But he is that entity, or his expansion is that entity who is lying on the ocean, come from the body of Nara, Mahavishnu. So that's the interchangeable, that's the non-difference aspect. And then there's the difference aspect, because Krishna is under a tree in the forest of Vrindavan, not lying in an ocean somewhere. Okay?
Okay. Maharaj, one more thing. Nitya Gauranga asked that question, that prototypes Brahma, Shambhu and Kshirodakshaya Vishnu, they are not in Mahat Tattva, so are they in causal ocean?
Well, Mahavishnu is in the causal ocean, and they're born from his body, which is in the causal ocean, or lying on Anantashesha. But there's a function for them, which is then he dispatches them, or their expansions enter into the universes as the presiding deities of the modes of nature, the controllers of the guna avatars. So there's no specific mention, but since Mahavishnu is in the causal ocean, and they're expanded from him, and then they're sent within each of the universes, so they're within the causal ocean, or they're with Mahavishnu, who's within the causal ocean, and then sent within each of the universes.
Okay. Thank you, Maharaj.
Yes.
Yeah, can you put that question? Yeah, this question is from Brajari Prabhu. He asks, in verse 17 it says that the pastime of preservation, creation and destruction is contained in this material world, so it is perverted. But then it says that Mahavishnu prefers to consort with the goddess Yoga Nidra, so how can it be said that Mahavishnu gets a tinge of material world?
How can it be said that Mahavishnu does what?
Gets a tinge of the material world.
Gets a tinged?
Tinge.
Changed?
Tinge.
Tinged?
Yeah, that is contaminated or...
He doesn't. It's Shambhu who gets contaminated. I don't know what reference he's making, but I mean, at least 18 times we've heard he doesn't. So I don't know where he gets that he does. If if he can type something in his chat thing and tell you what he means, where's that reference? He plays the pastimes of preservation, creation, and destruction through the agency of Shambhu and his other potencies that Shambhu consorts with. Maybe that's the clue to what his question is pursuing. Okay, looks like breakfast time. Srila Prabhupada ki... I don't know.
10 o'clock would be okay?
Yeah, 10 o'clock is good.
Sure. So we'll resume at 10 o'clock. Hare Krishna.